some of the politicians are promising that there's going to be a wall built. Other politicians are promising that there's not going to be a wall built. And it's just this kind of madness. I mean, what can we do about it? So I came up with a compromise. You all know I'm a master compromiser. I say, build a wall all across the Mexican-American border, but make it just 2 feet tall. So the people that say we promise you a wall, we got you the wall, and other people that need the illegal immigrants to bolster their support, they'll get all they need. I just read an article on California. They said that California had 1.5 million more voters than they have registered voters. So they need the illegal immigrants. There's a lot going on that's kind of crazy in our country. And the thing that was most telling about this whole episode is the idea that they were able to lay off 800,000 workers. The government was able to lay off 800,000 workers. And I'm sure that some other workers will get paid, but it's illustrative of this. That there's a lot of power in the government. The government has a lot of power. You figure the income tax you pay the IRS, then you guys should pay your local taxes, your state taxes, and of course the Federal Reserve Bank and the power that it has. That our money system is, it seems like we don't have any say in it. I've always been a big fan of Adam Smith and the 18th century Scottish economist who talked about the invisible hand of the free market. There's no freedom in the market. There's the government. Oh, but we're losing more and more of our rights to the government. It just seems to incrementally get worse and worse. And but of course, there's people that believe that the government should have power. The government's here to protect us. And they did I saw a Pew study of millennials, and it said that 40% of all millennials believe that the government should prevent people from making bad statements about minorities. 40% of all millennials believe that you should not be able to speak out against certain minorities. It goes right against our free speech. That's what drove our country, freedom of speech. That's what differentiated our country from the rest of the world, free speech. But now they're talking about limiting it. So the government is incrementally more and more taking over our lives. And the question is, as Christians, what do we do about it? What's our responsibility with the government? We're going to continue our series now on the cultural changes in our lives, and this week we want to talk about the increasing influence that our government has over us, and what exactly can we do about it? So let's just ask the Lord's blessing on this discussion. Our Father, as we come to you this morning, that these are confusing times, Lord. And the idea that government is usurping your power, Lord, it bothers us. And Lord, we would look to your word this morning as we come to terms, to come to grips with this, what's going on in this cultural change, about government influencing our lives and government usurping your powers and your authority in our lives. We pray in the precious name of the Lord, Jesus. Amen. Last week we started a discussion on cultural changes, and we gave 5 principles of cultural change. And we talked about Nebuchadnezzar going down into Judah and taking those young boys captive, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and took them back into Babylon to work in his administration, work in his courts. 10 years later, Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, is in rebellion against Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar goes down and he takes out all the royalty out of Judah, takes all the important, prominent people out. 10 years later, 586 BC, he overthrows all of Judah, destroys the walls of Jerusalem, and destroys the temple, and carries off all the valuables from the temple, and he takes all the people from the south and brings them to Babylon. Well, in the 2nd chapter of the book of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. He dreams of this statue, and he's just mesmerized by the statue. The text says he has dreams of. So the idea is that this dream is reoccurring, constantly reoccurring. It's bothering him tremendously. What's going on with this dream? It's just wrecking his brain. The dream is he dreams of a statue. The statue's got a golden head. It's got silver arms and a silver chest. It's got a bronze stomach and bronze thighs, iron legs, and feet of iron and clay. So he's so bothered by it, he decides that he's going to build a statue just like it. So he builds a statue in the plains of Dura, wherever the plains of Dura, I think that's somewhere within the city of Babylon, I would take it that way. But he builds a giant statue, 90 feet tall. He gathers all the important people in Babylon to come out and observe this statue that he's erected. Now, I don't know what the statue looks like, but I have a sneaking suspicion that it might look a lot like Nebuchadnezzar. So he gathers this band together. The band's got a zither, a lyre, a harp, a horn, and it's a band he gathers together. Now, I don't know what kind of music they're playing. I don't know if it's reggae or classic rock or big band hero music. I don't know what kind of music they're playing. But he plays the music, and at the sound of that music, everybody should bow down and worship that idol. So he plays the music, and the people all bow down. Now, I don't know what's going through their minds. You look at this and say, he wants me to bow before the statue. Who cares? What's the big deal? Who cares? But there's three men that don't: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They refuse to bow down. Now, the Bible doesn't give any particulars about how he comes to find it out, but his officials drag these three boys before the king and tell the king that these boys will not bow down before your statue. So he tells them, if you don't bow down before the statue, you're going to be thrown into the furnace, a fiery furnace. And they refuse to do it. So he gets his guards, his strongest guards he's got. He takes the guards, and they take the three boys and throw them into the furnace. Two of the guards are killed immediately because the furnace is that hot. Well, they look in the furnace, and they see the three boys inside, unharmed by the fire, and there's someone else in there with them. Now, that someone else described as the Son of God. I take it to be Christ. Other commentators take it to be Christ, but we can't be sure of that, but it's probably Christ. But there's nothing wrong with them. So they get the three boys out of the fire and bring them to stand them before Nebuchadnezzar. And they look at Nebuchadnezzar and they say, our God is able to bring us out of this fire. And if he doesn't bring us out of this fire, we will still worship him, but we will not worship your statue. And Nebuchadnezzar looks at them and said, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So, what can we learn from this little vignette? First John 2:16. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. John talks about the flesh, the lust of the flesh. The idea that you just crave things for yourself. You just want pleasure, no matter what happens. Pleasure in your body, pleasure for your food, pleasure, we just want pleasure. The lust of the eyes is we want materialism. Everything we see we want. You look at someone, I want that. And then the pride of life. The pride of life is the idea that you just want to be better than somebody else. You want to be better than everybody. You want to be better than this person, that person. That's the problem with Nebuchadnezzar. The pride of life. He wants to be better than. He's not content to be the king of Babylon. He wants to be the king of Judah. He wants to be the king of everybody. As a matter of fact, the implication here is that he wants to be king of everybody. He wants the whole world to be exalted. He wants the whole world bowing down before him. That's the way people sometimes are that are elected into positions of power or given positions of power. We see it in the Roman Empire. During the time during Jesus, everybody held Caesar. Caesar was a god in people's eyes. He thought of himself as a god, and the people were supposed to think of him as a god. Whether you were a Christian or not, you had to think of Caesar as a god. Well, 300 years later, Constantine becomes the king, becomes the ruler of the Roman Empire. Constantine's a Christian. So what does Constantine say? Everybody in the kingdom's got to be a Christian. You've got to convert to Christianity. It's always that lust for power. People get into power, just as power. They crave more and more power. 800 years, in the year 800, Charlemagne becomes the Holy Roman Emperor. And Charlemagne decrees, well, Charlemagne again is a Christian, he decrees that everybody's head that gives birth to a child, the child has to be baptized. If the child is not baptized, you will be executed. Again, it's the idea of craving power, just gaining more and more power. Augustine, the great Christian theologian, once said that the church carries two swords, the sword of the Spirit, so that we convert people to Christ, and the sword of steel if they don't. This is the way people are, that they crave power. And you see it in the world today and in the history of the world. You see it in our Congress today too. That, during the early days of our country, people would be elected to Congress. They would stay for maybe 2, 4, 6 years, and they'd go home. It was just a given. They didn't think about anything else. But now, in our culture, in our country, men get into power, and they just stay there. They make a life, they cling to power, and they stay there for years, almost to the 90s. People, they just crave power. And so that's the first thing we learn about this vignette, is that people crave power. They want to control people. The second observation we might make is this. That we will be subject to the government authority, for there is no authority except which God has established. The authorities that have been established are established by God's word. The idea there is that we are to be obedient to the government. You notice that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were taken prisoner. They were taken out of Babylon, and they were taken out of Israel and taken to Babylon. They were mistreated tremendously. They were abused in such a way that the boys could never marry, they could never do anything. They were just totally controlled by the tyrant Nebuchadnezzar, and yet they were totally obedient to him. So they were just obedient. And that's the idea that we have today. We're under the government, we have to be obedient to it, we have to obey its rules. But remember the last time we talked, we talked about the 5 principles of when the culture changes. The first one was to recognize God's hand. And the second principle was we need to propagate the faith no matter what. The third principle was we need to influence people. We need to pray for people, and we need to realize that Christ is in charge. So we need to be obedient to the government, but we need to influence it too. We need to use our wits and our abilities, all the freedom that our country gives us to influence people to think like think in terms of freedom. It's a good thing to know the Constitution, understand what's going on. Probably the greatest thing, in my own personal opinion, the greatest thing that we could ever have in this country, and that would help a lot of the corruption and government usurping the power of God, is term limits. You really understand what term limits are. In the early government, people just went for 2 or 3 terms and that was it. But now these people are locked into power, so term limits go a long way. Understanding how the Constitution works, understanding how the Federal Reserve System works, and maybe getting rid of the Federal Reserve System and all going back to the free hand of the invisible hand of the free market. So we need to be able to argue those ideas. We need to be able to persuade people. We need to love people. We got our political enemies out there. There's people on that other side of the aisle that you want to just strangle them. But you want to love them, you want to talk to them, you want to persuade them, and you want to pray for them. When's the last time you prayed for your political enemy? We need to pray for people. We need to influence them. So, men are going to be in positions of power. We got to obey the power, but we got to try to influence them. Next is we got to disobey the commands that violate God's commands. We see this in the book of Acts. Remember the story that Peter is told by Jesus to go out and do evangelism, and when he does, he's arrested and thrown in prison. And I love this verse. I love this passage. They throw him in prison. They let him out of prison. What do they do after that? They beat him and then tell him they can't speak in the name of Christ. So it says, and they called them in again and commanded them not to speak or to teach at all in the name of Jesus. Peter and John replied, which is right in God's eyes, to listen to you or to him, who be the judges. As for us, we cannot help speaking about what we have seen and heard. Jesus told them to speak about Christ, and what the government says is irrelevant. Whether it's right to obey God or not, you decide. But we can't help but speak of the things that we know. We need to disobey commands that are contrary to God's will. And that's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. They obeyed the government, they worked with the government, tried to influence the government. When the government told them they had to bow down and worship a God, they said no, because in the book of Exodus it says that you shall have no other gods before me. So they disrespected that. They did not have to obey it. We saw the same thing in the book of Exodus, didn't we? With the Hebrew women, they were told by the Pharaoh to kill their babies, but they refused to because it was contrary to God's law. So we need to be able to do things that are contrary to God's law. One of the saddest things that we've heard about this week is this new abortion law that's before in New York State, where the woman can abort her baby on the day of its birth. You go to the hospital to give birth. You need to give birth to the baby or kill the baby. It's just an awful thing. But when they start telling you that you've got to abort, you've got to disobey their orders. And we see this in China. There's a one-child policy in China, and people had to abort their children. We need to say no to that. Anytime the government says something that opposes God's law, we've got to say no. Fourth principle is this. First principle is this, to know that God is with us at all times. It says, the Bible says this, what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Japheth, and about David, Samuel, and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms in the midst of justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, escaped the sword of the flood, of the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies, women received back their dead, raised to life again. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released, so that they might not gain an even better resurrection. Some faced years of flogging, even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was unworthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what they had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that they may together be with us when we made perfect. The idea there is simply this, that remember when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said that God is able to deliver us from the furnace, but if He doesn't, we're still not going to bow to your statue, because God is going to be with us no matter what. And that's what the writer to the book of Hebrews is saying here, that Samson, these other great men of God, they died believing the things of God, and they died in being persecuted for their faith. And some lived in sheepskins and animal skins, lived in holes in the ground, were tortured, beaten, killed. And God was still with them, and God honored them, and God will honor them in the time of rewards. And that's what God is saying to us today too, that when we disobey the government, because of what the government's doing, that God Himself is going to honor us in some way, shape, or form in the end times. And when we read the book of Revelation, we read about this tyrant, this world dictator that's going to come about. And it makes me nervous sometimes when I hear about this, the new world order, or the global economy, things like that. Because we're all moving toward this. It's moving toward this. And the government is taking more and more of our rights away. For example, I heard the government is going to, if you're on medicinal marijuana, that the government come and confiscate your weapons, or the government is going to make you pay a large insurance policy if you own weapons. It's incrementally getting worse and worse as we get into the end times. I don't know where the United States fits in. I don't know. The United States isn't mentioned in the book of Revelation. But this world dictator is going to come about. It's going to demand exaltation. It's going to demand total worship. He's going to demand that you put a mark on your forehead, a mark on your forearm. Now, I don't know if that's figurative or literal. Literally, or figuratively, when you speak of putting a mark on someone's arm, you're asking them to give his word to you. Put a mark on his forehead, he's asking you to give your mind to him. He's going to demand those things. But we as Christians need to disobey. Need to just not obey His commands, but know that when we disobey, God's going to be with us. So that's the principles that we've looked at today. That men gravitate toward power, and that we need to be obedient to the government. We need to be people that resist claims that are contrary to God's will, and know that God is with us at all times, no matter what. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for your word today. Thank you for your grace and your love. Thank you for the word, Lord. And thank you that you're there all the time, Lord. That no matter if the government usurps its power, takes over our lives, so that, Lord, that you're with us, Lord. You'll be with us forever and ever. In Jesus' name, amen. I think I got some prayer.